Yeah. So next speaker is Dr. Arvind Sharma. So he needs no introductions. He has been actively involved in comprehensive stroke care, and he is from PGI Chandigarh, and he has done his fellowship from in stroke. And can you hear me? Is it audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yes, Mr. Latesh.
Yeah. So he has done his clinical fellowship in stroke and neurosciology, and so he has best papers in AOCCN in 2009 and lots of others. So he's been founding member and treasurer of Society of Neurosciology, executive member of Academy of Neurology of Ahmedabad, and president of ANBAI. So I think there are lots to say about him. So he has this wonderful, my senior, my mentor. So I'll request Arvind sir to start his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Viplab and Vishnu. It's a love to be here with you guys. Thank you very much for the introduction. Should I share my slides? So, am I audible and you are able to see the slides, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So, I would like to thank and congratulate Dr. Padma and Dr. Rohit for the wonderful first virtual stroke summer school, and wonderful talk by and the data presentation by Dr. Shelja. And it is always love to hear from her, and great comprehensive presentation by Dr. Deepthi for the small vessel disease. Now coming to the third topic for this vasculopathy, that is the arterial dissections. We all know there are a lot of controversies which are there hanging around in the treatment part. As we are here to see the classroom, all this in the seminar hall, wonderful to see all the resident there. So we'll go through the basics of the arterial dissection, and then we'll move further for the what is the pathogenesis and what is the treatment and the management, and what are the diagnostic modality now used for the disease. So arterial dissection is a arterial dissection. The craniocervical arterial dissection is rare, with an estimated annual incidence of 5 per 100,000. Extracranial segment of the carotid and the vertebral arteries are much more common likely to undergo dissection than the intracranial segment. We all know about it. It is explained by the greater mobility and the potential for them to be injured by the contact with bony structure, cervical spine, and the styloid process, specifically the vertebral artery. If you see the data by the prospective study, they are divided into the spontaneous cervical artery dissection. The internal carotid artery has 68%, vertebral artery 27%, and both can be in 5% of cases. And in the internal carotid artery, the multiple dissection is then the same artery, and for vertebral, it can be the bilateral vertebral because of the trauma. So the cervical artery dissection is defined as the splitting of the arterial wall of the carotid or vertebral artery. It is generally characterized by an intimal tear and intramural hematoma, which we'll see on the investigation. It is spontaneous, no evidence of any preceding trauma or traumatic. The spontaneous ICA or vertebral artery dissections are 2% of the ischemic stroke. But the last statement, that is, it is 10 to 25% of the ischemic stroke in young and the middle age group. So it is one of the most important cause for the young stroke, which we should know. So if you see our data from Dr. Kameshwar Prasad and Shelja, who have presented in 2010 and 2009, we should know whenever we see a young stroke for the large vessel disease, this point, you have small vessel disease, other vasculopathy, vasculitis, but this dissection, spontaneous or traumatic, should not be missed in the young stroke. It is one of the most important, and you see how high percentage of the stroke is. These are all the list of the young stroke. The cervical arterial dissection come on the one of the most important factors, where you have to ask the history for the minor head trauma, headache, facial neck pain. You should not miss the neck pain, and you should have a very high suspicion for such diseases. Then you're thinking of the PFO, small vessel disease, other diseases, systemic lupus erythematosus for the cause of stroke, even the sickle cell disease. But dissection you should not miss in the young stroke, even if you don't get any imaging findings on the CT angio or MR angio or even on the DSA. So arterial dissection, the environmental factors 1 to 2% with direct or blunt trauma to the neck, and it can result from the hyperextension, rotation, and lateral version of the neck. But I want to especially mention during the era of these mobile, as we have gone digital because of the lockdown, we have to understand about the minor trauma, the history. That is like a prolonged use of the telephonic conversation, which is done on the phone with the neck, holding the neck totally joining to the shoulder, treadmill running, springboard diving. That is a lot have been happening when we are in the lockdown. Prolonged head tilting because sitting on the laptop, vomiting, prolonged practicing yoga, and it is digital lifestyle, sit on the laptop and doing the same exercise in the same room. So we have to be very cautious about the environmental factors. The intrinsic factor, that is the spontaneous dissection. We all know about the arterial anomalies, fibromuscular dysplasias, aortic root dilatation. Heritable connective disorder, you all know about the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome type 4, Marfan syndrome, and most important, we have a very good nephrology department here with our center and a very high transplant unit. The autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease, one of the resident has the thesis, we have seen 1 or 2 arterial dissection in that, osteogenesis imperfecta. So location for the arterial dissection for the extracranial internal carotid artery dissection affects the cervical part of the artery distal to the carotid bulb and then not to extend beyond its entry to the petrous portion. You should know about the cervical dissection. And for the vertebral artery dissection, it is V2 and V3 with the 35 to 34%, very equal. And if you see on this picture, the V1 is from the origin to the entry to the transverse foramina of the C6 vertebra, and V2 is the mid-cervical course between the C6 to C2, and Atlas loop regime, and V4 becomes the intracranial segment. So if you see what are the differential features with this paper, which is the cervical artery dissection and ischemic stroke patient study, which has nicely depicted the differences between the internal carotid artery dissection and the vertebral artery dissection. So they have analyzed 982 consecutive patients of the cervical artery dissection, in which they have found 619 were the internal carotid artery and 327 of the vertebral artery. And they found the internal carotid artery dissection are more often men, and there is a history of a recent infection, and tend to report less neck trauma in the previous month compared to the vertebral artery dissection. So internal carotid artery dissection presented with headache at admission, but less frequently compared to the cervical pain, which is more in the vertebral artery dissection. And among the cervical artery who has sustained ischemic trauma, they have a higher NIH in the internal carotid artery dissection with the vertebral artery. Even the aneurysmal direction are more common and bilateral dissection less frequent in the internal carotid artery dissection. So multiple concomitant dissection tends to be clustered on the same artery rather than involving the both vertebral and the carotid artery. So ICAD has a less favorable, the internal carotid artery dissection has a less favorable 3-month functional outcome, but has not shown very significant on the NIHSS scale. So if you see the demographic characteristic for the internal carotid and the vertebral artery dissection, males are more common in the internal carotid in this study. And most important factor which we should not miss even in the arterial dissection is the hypertension. So hypertension, you can see it is equal both for the internal carotid artery and the vertebral artery, and infection definitely predominantly has been already discussed, and trauma more in the vertebral artery. And migraine has been also shown as one of the factor. And if you see what are the clinical presentation, cervical pain definitely 66% in the vertebral artery dissection, and headaches are equal in both. But if you see the cerebral ischemia, you will see more ischemic stroke, the posterior circulation ischemia in the vertebral artery dissection, and the transient monoocular blindness more in the internal carotid artery, 8.2%, and subarachnoid hemorrhage more in the internal carotid artery and even the vertebral artery. So if you go further for the radiological feature for the internal carotid and vertebral artery dissection, bilateral dissection are more common in the vertebral artery because of the trauma. And arterial occlusion are par equivalent. Stenosis is both equal in internal carotid and the vertebral artery, and aneurysmal dilatation more in the internal carotid artery, and mural hematoma is equal in both. So if you see for the cervical artery dissection, the pathogenesis, there are three types of pathogenesis which were described in the literature. That is between the hematoma, which is between the intima and media. You can see in the picture the stenosis and the thrombus. And between the media and adventitia, there is an aneurysmal dilatation. Once the tear occur in the wall of the artery, blood is allowed to enter between the layers of the wall of the artery, that is hematoma. The splitting of the layers result in stenosis. Hematoma is located between the intima and media, and aneurysmal dilatation, as we already said, between the media and adventitia. So pathogenesis 2 is the intramural hemorrhage forms through rupture of the vasa vasorum without intimal tear. And the third mechanism which is suggested is the atherosclerosis, which is not much as comparable to the other two pathogenic factors if we compare the all three pathogenesis. So what are the symptoms by which the cervical artery dissection present? The pain is a characteristic unilateral headache, two-thirds of the patient, and pain is usually initial manifestation. The median time is appearance is 4 days. And the cranial nerve palsy in the form of Horner syndrome consists of meiosis and ptosis. The lower cranial nerves are more importantly affected. The first local symptoms and then the ischemic event, and they can be asymptomatic. We have to have very high suspicion in the young stroke. The cerebral and the retinal ischemic symptoms are reported in 50 to 95% of the patient in the form of TIA or ischemic stroke. The relationship between the cervical artery dissection and the thromboembolic disease is embolic or hemodynamic. So if we see the retrospective study and in our own clinical experience and all the data, it is the thromboembolic phenomena, the thrombus form there, and the territorial infarct involving the cortical and subcortical one, 92.2% of the all infarct, and hemodynamic is very less. So mechanism is the local symptom and sign because of the distension of the internal carotid or the vertebral artery by the mural hematoma, stimulating the pain-sensitive receptors. The cranial nerve palsy and even the Horner syndrome are because of the stretching of the sympathetic nerve and the cranial nerve fibers. So if you see the location for the internal carotid artery dissection, the commonest location is the 2 to 3 centimeter distal to the carotid bulb. And that is the most of the stretching because of the extension and rotation of the neck, even for the spontaneous dissection. So I'll go in between with one of the cases, and then we'll go to the diagnostic modality and the treatment part in another 7 minutes, what I got. 35-year-old male, hypertensive for 3 years, not on regular treatment, chronic smoker, young with chronic alcohol consumed, had a painless vision loss in the left eye. Then he has noticed a mild pain in the neck on the same day. Next day, he developed an inability to speak and the right upper limb and lower limb with a deviation of the angle of mouth. Blood pressure was 170/100, drowsy, motor aphasia, right hemiplasia. CT revealed the hypodensities in the left frontal parietal region, basal ganglia extending to the periventricular white matter. So patient fall in the category of young stroke, hypertension, smoking, we can see that. And if had a similar history of the 60-year-old atherosclerotic occlusion of the left carotid causing Muir's figures and the artery-to-artery embolus. Although large artery atherosclerosis can be seen in tune of 10 to 28% in the young. Neck pain is a red flag in the history, and if you see on the further evaluation, he was found to have a left IC occlusion in the cervical part, approximately 4 centimeters from its origin, and this being usual site for the atherosclerotic occlusion. When we did the imaging, we found dissection on the carotid. You can see how they are divided into half with the false lumen in the carotid artery, the cervical carotid dissection. So now coming to the question about the arterial dissection imaging. So which is better, which is best, which for client, what want, good, expensive. So that all goes in mind for the management and the treatment when you come for the any disease nowadays when the endovascular is involved or other factors are involved for the treatment. So the most used and in the traditional manner before was the digital subtraction angiography, the traditional standard of diagnosis. And the most common finding on the conventional angiography was the diminished antegrade trickle of the contrast in the ICA term, the angiographic string sign, and represent the long segment of irregular and eccentric narrowing of the lumen of the vessels. String sign is a hallmark for the carotid arterial dissection, as you can see here. but it is not specific. It can be seen in the pre-occlusive atherosclerosis. So after coming to this modality, the magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, come in picture with angiography, it has replaced the conventional angiography. And definitely, if you look into the intramural hematoma, is the most common finding in the carotid. If you can see the arrow here, the carotid dissection seen in MR. And MR is sensitive 85% and specific to 99% in the diagnosis of dissection compared to the conventional angiography. And this is a actual T1 phosphine echo with FET separation and flow compensation image demonstrate a high signal intensity in the extrinsically located patent lumen hyperintense crescent-shaped intramural hematoma, which you can see on the actual image when you are suspecting a young stroke and a dissection. So CT angiography, a typical finding are narrowing eccentric lumen surrounded by the crescent-shaped mural thickening, annular enhancement. And if you see on the longitudinal image, you can find an intimal flap, dissected aneurysm, and narrowed lumen with crescent-shaped mural thickening. So CT were found to have similar term of diagnosis on the cervical dissection, but CTA is more often preferred in a setting of trauma because you can see other osseous structures and bony structures when you are trying to find any fractures or other diseases, other part of the bone. So the carotid and vertebral ultrasound, it is a very good bedside modality, non-invasive method for serial imaging of dissection and for monitor the possible recanalization and progression. Evaluation is allowing for the direct visualization of the artery and the hemodynamic information. And you can see the progression in the real time. And a pathognomonic finding on the gray cell imaging for the intimal flap floating in the lumen, and two lumina is seen on the longitudinal, and this is on the axial view. What is the, if we come to the conclusion part of the management, what is the natural course of arterial dissection if you see the patient of arterial dissection? The follow-up study showed that resolution of stenosis in 46 to 90%, recanalization of occlusion in 33 to 50%, and dissecting aneurysm resolves in 5 to 40%, and decrease in the size 50 to 30%, and remain unchanged 50 to 60%. But it has seen the resolution or recanalization typically occur within 3 to 6 months, but improvement are rarely seen after 6 months. So coming to the management part in another 3 minutes to arterial dissection, the first most important question which come to all the residents and when we go in the practice, thrombolysis, we are all scared about hemorrhage, but we should know that it is safe and not contraindicated if the patient present within 4 and 4.5 hours of the time window. So that is the most important, and you treat just like other disease for the stroke of those patients. Endovascular definitely is tricky. The learning experience is needed. Those who have a very high volume center, they can use for symptom persist despite adequate medical treatment. And when there is a contraindication to the antithrombotic therapy or thrombolysis, and there is evidence of expanding dissectic aneurysm, or when cerebral blood flow is significantly limited due to stenosis. And it is very much now in picture for the endovascular treatment in arterial dissection. Antithrombotic, a big question between the antiplatelet and anticoagulation is still not answered, and it is the personal preference. And the most landmark and an important study, which was the antiplatelet treatment compared with the anticoagulation treatment for cervical artery dissection, that is CADIS. And they have seen and enrolled only 250 patients, and the mean randomization time was major presenting symptoms were stroke and the transient ischemic attack, and with headache, neck pain, and Horner syndrome. And the participant was assigned to antiplatelet and anticoagulant treatment of the physician's interest, what they want to give. They can give aspirin, dipyridamole, clopidogrel, or anticoagulation in the form of warfarin or heparin. 250 patients of the stroke recurrence, stroke and death in 3, and they have found one major bleed in the anticoagulation group. So if you see, they have not found any difference in the efficacy of the antiplatelet or anticoagulation at preventing the stroke and death in the patient with symptomatic carotid and vertebral artery dissection, but stroke was rare in both the groups and much rarer. The diagnosis of dissection was not confirmed in many cases, but you have to keep the high suspicion if patient is young. And the another thing which you can do when you have a cervical artery dissection is during that time, as Mark Hughes and Dr. Vijay is going to speak in the further talks, the transcranial Doppler can be used, and we are using to see the hits, the microambuli, and that is definitely prognosticate your treatment to use the antiplatelet or anticoagulation. So I will conclude my talk with the saying that the arterial dissection are the significant cause of ischemic stroke in young patient. The carotid artery dissection may occur after trauma or spontaneously due to underlying environmental or intrinsic factor. Typically, patient present with unilateral pain, Horner syndrome, and ischemia. Presentation is variable, and some dissections are asymptomatic, but non-invasive imaging like MR and CT led to more frequent diagnosis, and management of carotid artery dissection poses a challenge to physician still. So I'll end my talk here. Thank you very much for the patient listening.
Okay, thank you, sir. Such a wonderful talk, and it's a very, I would say, if not very common, but I would say it's a very potential cause we see in patients, especially in young stroke. I mean, like we have been seeing this vertebral artery dissections, or I mean, posterocirculations or even anterocirculations also involving this short. So there might be some questions. Before that, I'll having one questions as well. So we have intracranial vasculitis versus extracranial vasculitis, right? So I have also seen patients where, especially during, if you do angiography, invasive angiography, I'm talking about, like subtraction, you take your catheters or your wear, you find that there is significant spasms happens. I mean, like this typically happens in patients who are having non-atherosclerotic, non-inflammatory arteriopathy or vasculopathy, which you say, like fibromuscular dysplasia. So just want to refer one patient, same patient was a young guy, was referred from Bangladesh. So he had long segment stenosis, actually, long segment carotid stenosis. That was severe stenosis, violated. And during angiography, we find, and it's very typical of FMD picture. So I just want to have your opinion regarding use of statin and ACE inhibitor in patients who are having extracranial, non-atherosclerotic, non-inflammatory vasculopathy, which is non-traumatic. Although you'll be adding antiplatelets there or anticoagulation. Yes, sir, please.
So wonderful question, Viplab, and you are a better judge for the intracranial stenting, or as you are doing a lot of procedures. But to answer the question about the statins, if you go through the literature, I have not put forth on the slide about the treatment of the statins because still controversial. It is being used off-label, but what I know of with reviewing the literature, when I'm going through the literature, when there is non-atherosclerotic, the use of statins is still very controversial, but they say that endothelial dysfunction and other part of the disease are stable by giving the statins. And even about the dose of the statin, I'm not sure. If any expert here can give more light, have used it, I haven't used it.
Okay, the one person had raised up their hand. Dr. Manish had raised their hand to ask a question. So, Dr. Manish, are you there? Dr. Manish? Sorry, okay. Anyway, I can't.
I think Vishnu, you can ask from his behalf. Even I asked him to unmute here from here as well, but I think you can ask then from his view.
Okay, I mean, he has not typed the question, so I don't know.
Oh, yeah, sorry. You can take the next questions then.
Okay, so there is a question called, is DSA needed in all cases to diagnose dissection versus thrombus?
No, I have made it very clear about it. So it is not necessary to diagnose DSA is not compulsory for it.
Okay, do you, I mean, from a personal point of view, do you look for dissection specifically in a neck trauma patient when you get a consult from high trauma, high velocity trauma neck patients? Even though they don't have stroke, a patient we advise to specifically look for the carotid. Sometimes stroke may happen a couple of days later, may not happen immediately.
Very good question. Very good question, Dr. Vishnu. And it's true that at our the ER, the protocol is fixed when they do a PEN CT. They do the vascular imaging also for such patients to rule it out, right? Because they are sometimes the young patient are asymptomatic for a few days. Very well said by you that it's agreed totally for that.
Vishnu, Biplab, can I just make a comment?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
It's mostly actually for the residents.
Right.
What sometimes you may see when the patient is having a distal occlusion, the vessel from the carotid may look like a tapering thing,
Yeah.
which is many a time diagnosed. We have done that initially also, thinking that it is dissection sometimes. There is a distal occlusion because of the reduced flow. It may look like a dissection. So in that case, you should always be looking for other imaging modalities. That is why in many of these imaging series, if you look at for dissection, they use always multimodality imaging to confirm dissection. May not be invasive, but at least multimodality.
Agree.
Okay. There's another query on duration of anticoagulation.
So the question who have asked, definitely it's a straightforward answer that all the literature says that after 6 months, the dissection don't progress. So it is for 3 to 6 months if you give a antithrombotic in the form of anticoagulation or antiplatelet.
Okay, so another question is any relation to cervical dystonias?
Definitely, as I have told when I was telling about the extrinsic factors, the environmental factors, but I've seen nature has a good thing to say. When a person suffering a cervical dystonias, they don't suffer. I have not seen much of the dissection in them. Rather, if they have a malformation like their Ehlers-Danlos loss or fibromuscular dysplasias, these are the common factors, the connective tissue heritable, then there are chances. But the cervical dystonias as such, the prolonged gap, if they see the hypothesis, it can, but not sure.
Sometimes I believe that something happens out of the blue, then only change. Cervical dystonia, people get adjusted to that, their neck is adjusted to that. I don't know, no, it's just a hypothesis.
Yeah.
I have a hand raised in the conference hall. If somebody wanted to ask from the conference hall.
Yeah, I wanted to just ask Arvind on behalf of the students in practice, when they see these patients and admitted, what is your pragmatic approach to the choice, whether you would go for anticoagulation in general preference or you prefer dual antiplatelets? I mean, I'm just wanting your personal view because you are the speaker today, so you are the best person to answer this question for us.
Thank you, Dr. Rohit, to putting me on that spot. And it's always a tough spot, it's a hot spot to answer that question. Thank you very much. So what I will say, if you, as a personal choice, when a patient come to you, and if it is traumatic and you see a subarachnoid hemorrhage, I will not generalize the thing that I will use anticoagulation, I will use antiplatelet, right? If you see a subarachnoid hemorrhage or a subdural hematoma, your preference would be more towards the antiplatelet. And definitely, if you are choosing either of them, if there is no hemorrhage in the brain, you can further go for any of one. So for my choice, it is more antiplatelet.
Thank you.
And evidence of carotid dissection is unlikely to come. It's more like a CVT. So the outcomes are generally good. So even if you do a trial like what CADIS trial does, both arms will not have any major outcomes. So invariably, they're going to be an underpowered negative trial. So I think we have done with this. We have 10:30. I think we should give the handle back to the organizing team. Biplab, you want to say something?
Yeah. So I have a question for Sailja ma'am. So ma'am, can I have a question for you?
Yes, yes.
Yes, ma'am. So in practical, I mean, we see lots of patients where we don't really find any definitive cause of a stroke, and of late I find this more in older person. I mean, although there are atherosclerotic disease and cardiovascular things which we first to rule out in stroke patients, but we don't find that which is significant, which is causing a stroke. And this patient, if you do DSA, you find some focal area of mild arteropathy in the form of like bleeding, but I would not say that is a typical bleeding which you find in case of vasculitis sort of thing. But say for example, we go for biopsy and we find that there is a fibrinoid necrosis. So you have a focal arteropathy sort of thing, changes plus fibrinoid necrosis, and we don't have any strong evidence of stroke, other causes like atherosclerotic disease or some causes of heart. So in that patients, I mean, how would you like to go for treatment purpose, whether you will be going for starting immunosuppressive therapy there?
I think that's a very important situation which can happen. And many a time we also have had a problem in diagnosing. If you have a patient who has got multiple risk factors and you do a DSA in these patients, and we know that they will have a lot of small vessel ischemic changes also as a part of hypertension and diabetes.
Right.
Even when you do the DSA, we know that there is a select group of patients who need not have extracranial and intracranial atherosclerotic disease. They may be having isolated intracranial atherosclerotic disease, and the DSA picture will look just like vasculitis. So in these patients, it is very important to consider it is more likely to be intracranial atherosclerotic disease rather than vasculitis. But I think in these situations, we
Some network issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear?
I think
the medium vessels and the larger vessels, the vessel wall imaging will give you a clue to differentiate between. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear.
Small vessel, differentiate between vasculitis and intracranial atherosclerotic disease. It's very, very useful. In the intracranial atherosclerotic disease, you see an eccentric changes, eccentric thickening with an eccentric enhancement, and sometimes you may even find the hyperintensity inside the hypointensity. So if you see that, that is very classical of ICAT. Sometimes you may not see that. In those situations, you have to take the other CSF, very important. In these patients, more than 70 to 80% of the time, the CSF is abnormal. It may not be pleocytosis. It may be either a pleocytosis or it may be an elevation of protein. So I think the decision is not very easy. You may have to have a combination of these investigations, clinical imaging, and including the DSA and decision on the biopsy. I think it should be a decision together. You cannot tell us with one investigation whether it is likely. And many a time, as we know, there are a lot of mimickers, and even the amyloid vasculitis. We know that is an important mimicker of primary CNS angiitis. In those patients, you should even ask the pathologist to do a separate staining to look for the amyloid stains.
Completely agree, ma'am. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. I think the organizers have asked to take one more. Somebody has raised up a hand. I think Dr. Sriditesh has raised a hand.
Yes, actually, this is regard to the Dr. Shailaja Madam's comment regarding the tapering of vessels in CT angio. Now, as we don't, many people don't do multiphase angiography, but one important practice point is look at the venous phase. If you look at the venous phase, that this is essentially a pseudo obstruction. So, if you have a distal obstruction, if you look at the venous phase, that that may not be seen. That it is essentially a discordance between the scan speed of the scan and the flow in the affected vessel.
Okay, thank you, sir. I think we have just over by just 5 minutes. I think we can hand over the mic to Suhas. Continue.